You know, when you hear Christmas songs, a lot of times you hear different themes regarding around Christmas. Whether it's family, whether it's being cheerful or being thankful, pretty much just the whole holiday itself all around. But then when you start to hear about a song about Grandma got run over by a reindeer, you start to wonder if that's really even a thing, or perhaps it's even a joke. Well, apparently for that song that was created by Elmo and Patsy back in 1979, it really seemed to be a really big thing. And in fact, that song actually was considered one of the worst songs of all time. Well, apparently the song actually got so much popular that apparently it got a Christmas special back in 2000. And that is something that was aired on Cartoon Network and other stations that pretty much aired the special. And that is something that we're going to be talking about for this review. This is a special that sort of pretty much is loved or hated by a lot of people. And what I mean by that is like a lot of people don't exactly like this special based on the fact that it's very cringy, it's very cheesy, it's awkward, and pretty much just straight up just doesn't make a lot of sense, even by the theme that it's based on. To be honest with you, with the special, I sort of grew up on the special when I used to watch it on Cartoon Network, and also had the VHS of it on my grandma's house, no pun intended. But honestly, when it comes to the special, I'm sort of in the middle of it. I either really like it, or I really don't like it. But to be honest with you, I pretty much dislike it more so than I do like it. But I pretty much only like it mainly because of nostalgic, which we'll kind of get to more so what I think about it and what I don't like about it. But a lot of it's probably obviously going to be that I don't really like this special that much, but that's something we're going to touch upon in this review. Now, the special was directed by Phil Roman, who is pretty much a animation veteran at this point. And if you guys don't know who Phil Roman is responsible for a lot of shows, a lot of specials that he's involved with in terms of direction. So much so that he's involved with the Garfield specials, Peanuts, the Tom and Jerry the movie, which a lot of people think is mediocre, myself included, and a whole list of different things that he's involved in. He also directed some of these seasons for The Simpsons, believe it or not. Even though I love the guy's work and all, I do think that the special is probably up there as one of his sleeper hits. And I mean that not in a really good way, since the special is pretty much crafted from a song that isn't really supposed to have a lot of material that's based around the special. It doesn't exactly have anything that would probably make it into an actual story. And pretty much with the way I look at this special, from based on what I've seen after rewatching it many years later, it's not really a special that has a really good solid story. And obviously for a lot of it, it's pretty much a story that is kind of really hard to describe and sort of has this weird snowball effect that it's really hard to even describe, at least. If anything, the plot is pretty much all over the place. It basically starts with Santa knocking over the grandmother in the story, and then it goes from him basically trying to save Christmas, and also from Santa not going to jail in this weird court trial. That's pretty much really what this story really is. And to be quite honest with you, even from this story, it jumps from plot from other inconvenience to other different things that go along with the plot. And in a way, honestly, it makes it really completely convoluted to follow. And in the sense that it almost kind of makes its own decisions as the story goes along. And to be quite honest with you, that's kind of why I really feel like when they came to the story, that the story really also doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's almost like they just said, fuck it with the story, we're just going to make our own shit up. Because that's kind of what I feel about this story. In a way, I find it's pretty much hard to catch up, especially if you're trying to follow the story from the way the special is supposed to be told. And the writing is just completely all over the place. There's even one scene where the kid is trying to save the family shop, and then afterwards he goes to the North Pole to find his grandma after she was missing for months. If anything, that's something that I would think that's kind of a weird plot convenience, and it's something that they already established in the very beginning. But they don't necessarily do that. And I sort of feel this is also the case with the running time. This pretty much has a shorter running time that doesn't really give it much time to actually just not give it much detail, much more to explain about most of the entire story itself. If anything, it just wants to get everything over with giving as much shorter detail as possible. And in a way, I feel like that's kind of its downfall, where it doesn't really give us enough time to actually give it more explanation to what's happening with the entire plot. It pretty much just gets us all the way from where the grandmother gets hit, and everybody's trying to think that she's dead. However, as what you expect from something based on a song, there are times where the scenes, they would actually reference the song poorly, especially when there's characters that are trying to prevent her from not going outside by getting hit by a reindeer. And I basically mean that in plural, since they reference so many of the songs, and there's a lot of them that are basically written by Elmo Shortmanshire, which obviously I kind of butchered the name itself. But honestly, when it comes to just the songs, they pretty much just have the purpose of just filler and transition. And it pretty much transitions from between the plot being extremely cringy, like almost to the point where it's just hilariously bad. Since it's one of its biggest downfalls in the special, it's just hilariously bad. It's bad enough that it actually puts a Disney film to shame, or hell, puts any Christmas song to shame. Pretty much this whole special, when it comes to its music, does not exactly go in with the theme of what it's trying to be, and that's Grandma got rid of our reindeer. And since this song pretty much only has one specific theme, there's like a whole bunch of songs that should pretty much not be in this special and doesn't exactly make sense. It doesn't exactly kind of go here with the story. It almost just kind of appears out of nowhere with actually like no substance. And that's kind of the reason why, like, in a way, I kind of think it's really funny and it's very cringe. But I think that's kind of one of the biggest downfalls that this special really has. Despite the fact that I can get some kind of humor out of the songs in this, but even then, it's still something that, if they're going to actually make something that is about Grandma Got Rid of My Reindeer, it should be at least something like songs that pretty much kind of go here with the actual special itself. Now that I talked about the music, what do I think about the animation of the special? Well, I think I agree with most people that actually have critical opinions about this special, that the animation is completely uninspiring. And what I mean by that is that the animation, you can tell, is pretty low budget, and I'm very curious to see what the budget was for this special, considering that it definitely looks like it's completely low quality. And honestly, the way I look at this special, for me at least, is that they could have done so much better with the way that it actually looked. The characters look completely dull, they don't really look as really coherent in that kind of environment, and they pretty much look all the same. Like, pretty much everybody in the special, based on the human characters, they pretty much look exactly the same. If anything, they look like characters from another special that pretty much were not really supposed to be in this special at all. But honestly, when it comes to the characters and based on what they look in the special, honestly, the way I look at them is that they're really stiff at times, and they don't exactly show a lot of gestures. And if anything, the characters just look completely stiff throughout the entire special. The only thing I probably would say out of all the characters that look pretty well done is probably Cousin Mel. I agree with most people that she looks completely hot, and she's probably like the only character that's quite appealing in this. Other than that, the characters don't really look that good in my opinion. If anything, they pretty much look like they could have been designed a little bit better, and pretty much could have been animated a little bit better. And you can kind of see that in some scenes where some of them can just leave off a scene where they're just stiff, and then it takes a second to go back to what the actual special is. And honestly, I really am not a big fan of that. I really think they could have done a little bit better with it. In a way, the special suffers from limited animation problems. And that's kind of something that they kind of should have never really did. But considering that this is actually low budget, I'm not really surprised that they would go this way. There's scenes that they pretty much have reused, and pretty much the characters don't really exactly look like they have any personality, and just feel completely stiff, and don't exactly show any gestures whatsoever. And that's something I'm not a really big fan of, like I said before. In a way, I sort of give it some credit considering how hilariously bad it is and how shitty the quality is. Because at least here, I can get some kind of humor out of it where I can laugh at it and be like, wow, I can actually draw better than this. And it's a shame because this special could have had some kind of, at least some kind of potential to it. Especially with the animation. But obviously, since it's low budget, and you could tell they kind of wanted to get it rushed on TV, and pretty much get it out there for direct-to-video sales to see if they can make some kind of money off it. The voice acting in this special is actually okay for the most part. It's not cringe quality. If anything, there's a lot of other things in the special that are completely cringe throughout the entire thing, but I think the voices are somewhat tolerable. I mean, they didn't exactly bother me for the most part. I know some people that kind of don't like the voice acting in this. I'll be honest, the voice acting wasn't too bad, so I will give it that. The voice acting isn't as bad as the rest of the stuff that's shit about the special. Now let's get to the nitty-gritty of this entire special, and that's the characters. Well, okay, so the characters in the special, I gotta say, to put it simply, they're not the only ones that got basically banged over the head and got hit by Santa. Let's just put it that way. I feel like Grandma isn't the only character that suffers. In this special, Grandma is portrayed as a sweet old lady who wants to spread Christmas cheer with no care for money, because this is the kind of special that really emphasizes the fact that money is the root of all evil. Yet, perhaps this is kind of unintentional, but it's rather funny when the film later finds her with her amnesia and can't remember a single thing, and she seems to be really cool with what's happened to her. In a way, I do think it's one of the highlights of this entire special, mainly because of the fact that the grandma is just cool with everything and just pretty much is in La La Land for most of the time when she has amnesia. To me, I think it's just rather hilarious. However, strangely enough, the grandmother is actually not the main character of this entire special. That would be going to her grandson, Jake. Pretty much, Jake is pretty much as what you would expect from most kid characters in every Christmas special. But I feel like with him, he's kind of just the type of character that he's pretty much Christmas crazy, and his biggest struggle in the film is other than finding his grandmother to prove that Santa actually exists in this world. Which I find is really another thing that's actually, I think, is really funny about the special. Everyone keeps telling him that Santa doesn't exist and that Santa's not real, whatever. But yet when Santa appears, everybody just acknowledges the fact that he's just there, and then, oh, let's just bring him to jail for what he did. To be honest with you, with this kind of scenario, I really think that they could have just had him where he kind of exists in this world, instead of just kind of like, disregarding the fact that he actually doesn't exist. Because really, he actually is like one of the main characters in the entire special, and literally, he's literally the whole plot convenience of this entire thing. To me, I find it's just completely ridiculous. As for the other characters in the special, to be honest with you, they kind of serve very little to the plot. If anything, they just come out completely uninteresting and just don't really have any personality to them. Like, Austin Bucks is the millionaire of the town. To be honest with you, the way I look at him is that even though he's supposed to be kind of like the somewhat of a villain in the special, I don't exactly fit him as like a villain. I find he's just a guy that pretty much just wants to come in and buy grandmother's shop, and that's pretty much it. The portrayal of Santa Claus is pretty much served as like the bare basics of how he is portrayed in most Christmas specials, but perhaps my favorite character out of this entire special is got to be going to the grandfather. He's just straight up just a dumbass character that it's just a really funny character to watch. Just how stupid and how oblivious he is to everything, it's just hilarious. Then you have the villain Cousin Mel, who pretty much serves as like the greedy villain that puts money over the holidays and the family business. She's so stereotypically evil that you often wonder why the family actually lets her do whatever the hell she wants and acts like the boss around them. I don't know, to me it just seems pretty ridiculous to how that she actually gets away with a lot of this shit. I will say one thing about her is that she is quite attractive, which I know it is kind of a stupid and pointless thing to say, but let's be honest. You gotta at least find something good about this special. For most of the characters in the special, I think me and Grandpa believe they're not as sensible as they believe. Overall, this special kind of serves as the type of animated project that is so bad that its existence is more fascinating than the actual song it is clearly based on. The story is an over-the-top mess, the animation is cheaper than any animation I've ever seen from any Christmas special, and the characters are just being one-dimensional is probably the least of their problems. I will say this right now that the special is terrible, and it's probably one of the worst specials I've ever seen. However, in terms of how I actually appreciate this special, I do appreciate it based on nostalgic factors, since I have actually grew up on the special, and I do sometimes watch it every year, just the fact that I can laugh at it and just really have a good time with it. That's kind of the whole basis of what you can get out of the special, and that's kind of what I would recommend for it. Even though, yes, it is terrible, and I do agree that some people, it is terrible. However, if you're trying to look for a special to watch, and you're somewhat curious, and you actually know that it actually exists, I would actually recommend it just for the laughter factor, since it is actually really funny to watch. And it's kind of like how I see about Eight Crazy Nights, which some people don't think it's actually a really good film, but honestly, the way I look at this special and comparing it to Eight Crazy Nights, I think Eight Crazy Nights is a better special to watch. Because, yeah, it's stupid and it is over the top, but you can at least some kind of get some enjoyment out of it, and it is actually pretty funny. You can sort of get that with this special, but only if you actually think that you can not take the special too seriously. Overall, Grandma Got Reindeer is a special that I probably would say is up there as one of the worst specials I've ever seen, but in terms of how I could see it as a nostalgic piece, I still sometimes go back and rewatch it, as it is something I can laugh at it and just pretty much just have a good time with it. As it is, it's one of those specials that you could just sit there and just have a good time with, just by how stupid it really is. And honestly, I recommend anybody who's really interested in watching it to just watch it just for the fact that you can just laugh and have a good time with it. Because I feel like that's kind of the whole point of this Spire special. It knows it's bad, and it knows it's not supposed to be taken seriously. So I think that's kind of the whole point of this Spire special. But even still, if you're interested, I'd still recommend it just for that particular factor. But other than that, I do not recommend it as a Christmas special, as I don't think it really is a really good special. That being said, that is my review of Grandma Got Run Over by Reindeer. Hope you guys have a pleasant Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. And thank you guys for watching this review.